The topic today is how do you identify high quality restoration projects, which is incredibly pertinent and important at this point in time. The content is designed predominantly at funders looking to invest in nature-based projects, and I think funders can mean a huge number of different things. And I'm Andy from Grosvenor. I'll explain what our role is within that funding sphere. But first of all, let's unpick the importance of the topic. The sector is a crucial inflection point at the moment. There's a huge amount of press on the offset market. Much of that is negative. And predominantly thanks to that, we've seen prices and quantities of offsets traded decrease fairly substantially year on year. So if you're kind of looking at the macro view of the market, it looks like it's struggling, but within that, there is always opportunity. And those who have a deeper understanding of the market see there are very different forces at play. Essentially, what's happening now, in my humble opinion, is that we're essentially clearing house. What's happening now is there's a lot more global media and kind of scientific focus and rigor on historic projects of different methodologies, different ages, different types. And we're clearing house. We're kind of getting rid of all the crap in the market and focusing on kind of creating new, better and more robust projects. So that's why today is so important, is because we need to identify those projects, we need to determine what is high quality, and we need to invest in them. By signing up to this call, I know I'm already kind of speaking to the converted here, but the carbon market is essentially an essential financial tool to drive positive change beyond our value chains. And this is the UN Decade of Action. We cannot do enough to kind of protect, restore, and limit the damage that we are creating. And the carbon market is an essential tool within that. So we need to rapidly scale it. And we need to see the VCM as a kind of a conduit to drive financial flows to kind of communities and the ecosystems that need that restoration. So that is my 3-minute spiel over. Who do we have on the call today to help us? Who is on the panel to help guide us through this process? Luckily, we have the whole of the value chain, or the vast majority of the value chain, in terms of the kind of carbon offset market. Starting with Terraformation, we have the project developer. We then have the technical specialists providing tools to monitor and implement kind of restoration at scale, which is Restore. And then finally, we have MORFO, who are the kind of the boots on the ground delivering these projects, delivering these ecosystem restoration projects. And then finally, we have little old me, Andy Haig from Grosvenor, who are kind of representing the investor and off-taker kind of at the top of the tree. So I'm going to give each panelist a couple of minutes to kind of introduce themselves, introduce their company and their role within their companies and what they're trying to achieve. But I will kick things off. So Grosvenor, for those who don't know, is the first European property company to have a long-term science-based target. So we have a 90% absolute emissions reduction between now and 2040. And I say that because, within carbon offsetting, absolute emissions reductions always comes first. To have a credible offset strategy, it needs to be part of that bigger picture. But we also, back in 2021, wrote our carbon offset strategy, where we committed to offset our direct corporate emissions from 2021 and our total value chain by 2025. Since then, we've secured 4 deals, ranging from spot purchases to forward offtakes, and also investing directly in projects. And we are a very risk-averse company, so we've spent a huge amount of time and effort on due diligence and selecting providers and projects that we trust, which is one of the reasons why it's taken us 3 years to secure just 4 deals. So I wish I was on this webinar 4 years ago, and then maybe that would have been a slightly, 3 years ago, and maybe it would have been a slightly quicker process. One of the deals we made was with Terraformation on a Ghanaian mangrove restoration project. It's very exciting, we might talk more about. And that was we were forward funding the project based on early scaling milestones with a kind of a 5-6 year offtake agreement within that. So we see ourselves as, well, I don't really see myself as an investor. I see myself as a property company who's committed to carbon offsetting and mitigation. But we have experience of procuring offsets both in the spot, so buying now, but also forward funding agreements and actually investing in schemes. So that is our potted history. I'm then going to go to each of the panelists and ask them to introduce themselves. So starting with Damien from Terraformation, I believe you got some slides, which hopefully will come up in a second. But yeah, over to you.
Yep. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Damien Kuhn. I'm a Vice President of Forestry Partnership at Terraformation. And yeah, I have 3 short slides to present Terraformation in a nutshell. Next slide, please. Then Terraformation restores native forests to address climate change, providing forestry teams with training, technology, and funding for large-scale certified carbon projects that revitalize ecosystem and enhance community climate resilience. Our team project have planted already over 1 million of biodiverse native trees and stored 131 million seeds in our seed bank. And we now have supported 19 forestry projects around the world, creating 700 jobs. We start usually from day one with our local partners to ensure full quality and transparency of all the projects we scale with our local partners. Next slide, please. Our innovative approach is basically working through an accelerator that we designed, the Seed to Forest Carbon Accelerator. And this approach not only equips local forestry teams with training, technology, and access to capital, but also give power to businesses to be part of a climate solution. And by investing in our project, businesses can directly address climate change and offset carbon emission, and also provide support to biodiversity restoration and create social impact with communities on the ground. That's it in a nutshell.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Great introduction. Makes me feel like I probably should have prepared slides myself. Next, Pascal from MORFO, if you can spend a couple minutes introducing yourself, that'd be great.
Sure, my pleasure. Hello, everyone. So at MORFO, we have an expertise and a mission is to restore large-scale tropical forest ecosystems and maximizing these environmental, social, and economic benefits. So that's quite a challenge. And we started working in the tropical forest, as I grew up in French Guyana, where we were inside this Amazonian rainforest. And so this topic was kind of a dream and a mission from a very young age to say, okay, we'll have to restore this forest. We have so much human activities that are destroying and altering our soils and our forests. So how to make sure we can restore this forest with biodiversity, including these local communities, because we have billions of people living nearby this forest, and how can we make sure that we do these operations at scale? So the mission as MORFO is really to operationalize these projects to make sure we can do it. And so we have 4, let's say, solutions, or a solution in 4 steps, starting with diagnostics, like understanding the local environment, then planning over multi-years, how to restore these lands and making sure that it's a forest, so it's not in 3 months that you have a major forest. So how do you plan over 30 years to make sure that we plant the right species at the right time, and then to monitor to make sure we understand properly and accurately what is growing and following the right, let's say, KPIs about the forests. So yeah, in a nutshell, I think that would be it as well.
Amazing, thank you, super interesting. And then finally, Mick, Restor, over to you.
Thanks, Andy. Hi, everyone. Thank you for that intro. I feel like I too should have prepared some slides, but I'm really happy to be here and chat with you all on this super important topic. I'm a regional engagement lead at Restor, which is we dub it as a Google Maps built exclusively for nature. And on Restor, we are connecting a global community of nature stewards to data, to knowledge, to resources and markets for them to grow. So all of that while bringing more transparency and trust in these nature footprints to hopefully deliver positive impacts at scale. My work with Restor revolves around regional engagement, outreach, meaning onboarding of these nature stewards, projects, organizations, including funding organizations, onto our platform, primarily in Europe. Probably below 2 minutes, but I think that's enough for now.
Well, so far I feel like I'm doing a great job moderating because we're already on time. So long may that continue. So as I said, the idea was to spend between the first 60 minutes. We've had 50 minutes of intros. We're then going to have 3 questions over the course of the next 45 minutes for the panelists before opening up. But to reiterate, if you have questions as we're going through, feel free to put them. I mean, most people are using the chat function, but there's also the Q&A section. So if you can put open questions in the Q&A, then we'll try and get to them during our conversation. If not, we've got another 30 minutes at the end that we can really unpick that. So question number 1. This is meant to be an investor-focused webinar. So what does good investment look like in order to start and/or scale a project? Nature restoration project. So I'm going to start with Terraformation, said Damien.
Yep. Ideally, a good investor gets involved from the early stage of the project development. As you probably all know, the development of a forestry carbon project take, let's say, between 1 to 2 years, depending on the country of operation, and requires a significant development cost. And really having this investor as early as possible, I would say, in the process of the development of the project, provide really guarantees. It's a way also to take the time to really understand the local context of the project, and it provide guarantees to the landowners also soon in the project. You have to know that for most of the landowners in the tropics, especially small-scale landowners and communities, this time of project development can be a long time. Than having this investor as early as possible is really key. Number 2, I would say a good investor understands the local context and has a global understanding of reforestation issues. Of course, we are foresters. Reforestation has a strong technical component, but not only. It's also has a strong social component. And just because the tropical forest has been deforested for the last 50 years due to lack of economical and social alternative for people living around the forest, little employment opportunities and poverty. And then just by logic, to grow and protect the forestry plants, we must take this human issue into account. And it means a global analysis of the dynamic and driver of deforestation, including the social and the economical one, and invest. And then the good investor will also invest in the local economy, in job creation and local incomes, and will take this criteria into account while investing in a high quality project.
I've got a question. What kind of length of tenure do you want an investor to be involved in? Is it, like you say, it's 2 years of upfront capital. Do you want them to be in and out? Do you want a long-term investment? What does that look like?
The long-term investment is really important because that's one of the key differentiator of carbon projects. Is we are working on the 40 years project, which is completely different on the classical way of doing reforestation. And then having a long-term commitment of the investment is definitely also a key factor of success. We completely understand that also investor wants return, of course, and return as soon as possible, but keeping also some skin in the game, like all the other stakeholders during the longer time, and ideally the 40 years, but it could be in some cases 20 or 30 years. It's also really important.
Pascal, do you agree? What's MORFO's view on that?
Yeah, of course. Like, as we are really like these forest implementers. So we go on the field, we prepare like the seeds extra. And we have a big part of all our R&D inside the team to make sure that we pick the right species that will thrive through climate change. So what are the species that will thrive through like 3 degrees, 4 degrees, 5 degrees climate change? So we need to make sure that we have the right species, and then to have the right partners that won't look at a return in like 5 or 7 years, which wouldn't make sense in the projects that we are doing, even more because we are starting from the seeds and our seed pods and not from seedlings. So it really means that we start from nothing, from zero, from the seeds, the start of the life, we could say. And so that's really important for us to have this kind of partnerships. And we've defined like what we call our like 6 Ps for like a successful project patterns. That would mean to have the right purpose, the right place, the right plants, the right people, the right precision, and the right price. And if we align all this, then we can say that we have the right project that we can deploy, and that we can deploy confidently, and that we have the right framework so that we can deploy a high quality project. And so that would mean that we have the right ambitious, clearly defined objectives for the project, but as well that we have the right place and that we understand the place where we'll have to deploy. And so if you take Brazil, yeah, thank you, Quentin. But if we take the place like in Brazil, for example, it's common to start your project with like a thorough terrain history documentation and owner's surveys, because there might be issues, and if you don't take this into account, there might be a problem in the coming month or years when the project will let's say take more value through the growth of the trees. Then the second point is about the plants. So always like emphasize the role of the plants and not just the trees. And so thinking about all the layers of the forest, because we don't have only the trees that have this, but we have to think about these ecological successions of our forest. And that's why we restore between like 10 to 30 species at least as a beginning, to make sure that we can revitalize these degraded lands. The people, as Damien was saying, of course, local community involvement is key. And if like we of course need to collaborate with these people, whether for the operations, meaning for soil preparation, part of the planting, seed collection, monitoring, so many things more, but as well to make sure that we are well informed about the place and that we involve these communities because they will live nearby these places. Then the last two are like precision and price. Precision, of course, because we need to make sure that we can monitor these lands. And I think that's really a topic for Terraformation and Restor, making sure that all this technology advancement that we have about drones, about remote sensing, computer vision, can help having this really precise centimeter resolution analysis to make sure that we know what we are talking about, and that talking about this transparency, we all have this word, and this is the best way to show transparency. And the last one is, of course, about the price, and that's what Damien was saying as well, like having these business partners for the project, meaning that they will invest in the project before there are trees, so before tree maturation, because if you wait for that, then you have to wait for 5, 10, 15 years. But how will you deploy these first trees if you don't have the money before? And so that's why they are like really smart system, having this prepaid, let's say prepared carbon credits or prepared project to make sure that it happens and it has to happen. So yeah, that would be like the framework that we have to make sure that this is like a good investment from our funders.
I mean, you both talked about communities, which actually has made me reflect on maybe we should be flicking the question on its head. And what kind of investor would your communities want to work with? Because, you know, there's a little bit of you need the money to support them, but actually this is their livelihood, their land, their cultures. You know, hopefully as the partners that you are, they're happy with you and the work that you do. But, you know, you must have criteria for the types of investors you want to work with as well.
Damien, do you want to go? Should I go?
I would say one word is security. Most of the community we are working with really wants security as soon as possible. They are not really, and we of course during all the consultation process educate them on the carbon market, but it's very volatile for them, and they will really bring a lot of value on the investor, bringing security, long-term financing, in their project for their activity.
Yeah, and maybe to complement, it would be that I'm not sure like the local communities will have this direct contact with funders, and I think that's the role of what we have, like being on the field. I think that's Terraformation has this role as well, like being implementers, being on the field. Then you need this contact and making sure that you're speaking the same language. And so, as I was saying, if like people are taken into account in the investment from the funders, then us as implementers, we can like spend the time we need, the trainings we need to do, the involvement we need to like for this project success, to make sure like the whole project and the whole investment will be successful.
Perfect. Mick, Restor, I want to give you a little bit of time to answer the question.
Thank you. Yeah, so maybe, zooming out a little bit as sort of a home for projects and organization of all sizes, engaging with conservation, restoration, or sustainable use of ecosystems of any kind. We don't really fund our own projects, so to speak, but we interact a lot with them. And we also work very closely with funding organizations. And I think a lot is resonant with what was shared already, but what we're learning as facilitators in this space is that a good investment reaches project implementers directly insofar as possible, and especially indigenous peoples and local communities. It also trusts and empowers these people as they translate their visions and their plans into reality and into actions on the ground. And, that's by implementing certain management practices, real field interventions, or more subtle enabling interventions too. And I think what I'd perhaps like to bring to this conversation is that it also doesn't burden them with administrative procedures, right? On top of all the typically underfunded long-term work they're engaging with. So yeah, I think having said all of that, and picking up the line from Damien as well a little bit, a good investment ideally teaches how to fish instead of giving the fish to or creating this dependency on external resources. So it should boost the local economy, promote alternative livelihoods, or what we often call ecopreneurs on Restor, sustainable jobs and fair value chains. Yeah, I believe such are good investments and will contribute to a project's resilience and ability to scale and continue over the long run.
Did you call them ecopreneurs?
Yes.
Very cool. I like that. So Pascal, you're going to say something?
Yeah, just to complement on like this like amazing point that Mick just said about like this sustainable relationship with the communities and livelihood. I think that we hear from them that there were so much of disillusion and so many promises that were like broken in the last 10 years. And so we feel that this trust has to be built again, and that we need to give them visibility. And I think that's one part that we need to build with the funders as well, to make sure that we have this 30-year visibility, so that we don't start again like the same story, having this like project starting in 2 years and then being abandoned, and then like local communities will just refuse again and again the projects that we bring. Like we feel that talking to them that we need to start again the relation, to give them visibility, to pre-finance, give upfront payments on many things. And I think that's a good way to do it and to build the trust with them.
That's a perfect segue to one of the questions that's come in, and you've almost answered it, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. So Nicole has asked that she's interested in hearing how your respective organizations engage with indigenous people and local communities in the process of the project development. So, you talked about how important it is to get the investor involved right in the early stages. You probably need to get the community bought in as well. Like, do you have good examples, bad examples of what needs to happen? Open up to the floor.
I can give an example of the project in Ghana with mangrove restoration. Actually, one of the first activity 1 year and a half ago, when we started the activity, was the consultation. Basically, our local partner on the ground went from committees to committees, make a lot of discussion, under the tree, asking what do you want to do with your land here? What was the history? And all people in the village were speaking about where there was a mangrove 30 years ago, we had more fishes. And it's really a long hours and hours of discussion to really understand the context and why these committees want to restore the land with mangrove, because they could have also other option of restoration, not only putting back again trees, but they have several choice and alternative in front of them. And then this first discussion, and it's several months actually of discussion, because it's not only 1-2 hours of discussion and then we can check the box. We come back after a few weeks and weeks. And this series of consultation, we organize a kind of milestone with gathering all the committees in the same district on a workshop to say, hey, we listen to you, and then we think we listened of your expectation. Here is the strategy that we think we heard from each of you. Do you agree? Do you disagree? And I will just give you one example. One of the strong feedback during this 2 days workshop was, hey, we really want the project to support us securing better our land. And that's why we put a budget in the project also to support the committee to access to land title on their name, of course, and to support them into the process. It's a bit of bureaucratic with the government, and without a project or a partner, they will not be able to do by themselves. And that's one of the example in the concepts of Ghana, but I think it gives you a good overview, and my colleagues can share other stories.
As an investor looking down where we've been selecting projects, that is one of the kind of the critical points. You want evidence and proof that the community is part of that project, because essentially they're the ones delivering it and making sure that it's viable in 40 years' time. They're going to be the ones who deforest if they don't agree with what's happening. So that is a fundamental in terms of buy-in. And the other one, again, using the Ghana project as the example, you want a fair flow of capital back into the project and into the community, and making sure that the money goes back in trust so it can be used for the development and enhancement of that community as well. So again, going back to what a high quality project means, that fundamental engagement and empowerment of the community, I think, is critical. It's not just about planting trees, it's about making sure that the community wants it done and doing the right way. There's another, we've gone over the first 50 minutes, we do need to move on to the next question, but you've started to answer this, so I am going to ask the question anyway. But an anonymous question came in. Can restoration projects only be done on protected lands? If it's done on non-protected land, how do you ensure the trees are protected from illegal activities like logging? I know a bit about the Ghana project, obviously, as we're one of the investors, but you don't have to own the land per se. Terraformation or MORFO aren't necessarily going up and buying land. You're working with the communities, creating lease structures to empower them and to protect them, and so protect the rights of the people's ownership of the land, but also in terms of your activities. Probably more aimed at Pascal or Damien, but do you want to unpick that a little bit? How do you ensure that land is, or your activities are protected?
I can start. The basic thinking is really, there were in most area that we are restoring, it's because before there were forests and it has been degraded because of some of the driver. And our job as a project developer is really to put in place the right activities for the community not to come back to the unsustainable practice in the past. That means providing economical activities. Then that's why in a reforestation project, we are not speaking only about trees, but also about livelihoods. What can communities get out of the forest? For example, They can produce honey. Honey from mangrove flower is really good with a high value, and it gives an incentive for communities to keep the forest stand up and not destroy it. Another activity we can put in place is a financial also incentive with a community trust fund. By the project team every year is making an assessment, same in the village, showing the progress, also discussing the challenges they're facing on the ground. And based on the progress made, sharing benefits of the value of the carbon credits is fueled to some community trust fund. And this is money for communities and they can decide to invest on the activities they feel are priority for their development. And of course, job creation. It can be obvious, the job creation for the nurseries and people working on the ground, but there is also job creation in the monitoring of the forest and in the livelihood activities I just explained. People producing and selling honey is job creation, and this is an incentive, and people in the village know that it's thanks to the mangrove restore that they are able to live better, basically, and have a better life.
Perfect, thank you. I'll move on to the next question. There are a couple of questions that have come in that I will come back to. Don't worry, I'm not ignoring you, Kate and Fernando, but time is pressing. So my next question is around high quality and investor confidence. So as I kind of mentioned in my introduction, the VCM, it's an unregulated space. There's a lot of both positive and negative press within the VCM, probably more negative than positive at the moment. And that is based on, different verification standards, methodologies, vintages of projects, and kind of credits covering a huge range of different activities to reduce and remove carbon from the atmosphere. But the market is shifting. You have things like the ICVCM, the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market. So I'm going to use that as the definition of high quality now, although feel free to kind of correct me within the panel or on the chat. Even when Grosvenor wrote our offset strategy back in 2021, I referenced high quality 8 times, even though there wasn't necessarily a definition back then. So we kind of need to figure out what high quality is in order to attract investors to invest in the right types of schemes. So what do you, and I'm going to start, how am I going to start? I'm going to start with Mick now. Like, how can we build investor confidence their projects are high quality? What do we need to do to kind of prove and to show, to attract investors into these high quality projects?
Yeah, that's I think a really crucial question. And again, as a facilitator, we hosting over 25 global data layers on the platform, I think I'd like to start by saying we do not necessarily prioritize carbon over other ecological metrics. And we are, of course, aware of the risk that and the pitfalls that have arisen from this oversimplification of a panoply of different projects around the world and huge diversity in the ecological and socioeconomic context they sit in. But for us, and of course, that's the whole motto of Restore. Confidence is built on transparency, and that's something we assess through self-reported project data, or what we call metadata. This includes a project's purpose or goals, the associated sites being actually drawn and having their boundaries located on a global map, accessible to everyone. As well as what kind of interventions are being implemented there, when these have begun, and laying over all of that, of course, the pipeline of Restore is providing scientific insights and information that can boost that trust as sort of more globally standardized measure of what a project is up to on the ground. We also look at information about people and organizations behind the project, very much in line with what we were saying. So this includes what sort of organization is implementing the project, how is it funded, has it been funded in the past? So we're hoping in this way to also be able to build on trust that is granted by other organizations in this space already, right? So there's projects typically rely on multiple sources of funding and finance, and why not, we believe, harness all of that for the greater good. I think besides this, you know, a comprehensive, scalable, globally standardized monitoring toolkit. This again is very much in line with what we're all about in Restore. But yeah, I think that's essential for more confidence in the space, and to prove restoration and conservation is as effective as successful as possible. And I'd like just to share that the Crowther Lab, which is sort of the scientific foundation of Restore, and where Restore originally was built upon, will soon launch something that's called the seed metric, which will be accessible via Restore. And this is an index that is a holistic measure of intactness for every terrestrial ecosystem relative to its natural state, and will capture variation at 3 scales of biodiversity, within species variation, genetic level, between the different species variation, and also variation across ecosystems or at the landscape scale. So this sort of, I think, emerging tools and also co-benefits and new approaches to carbon crediting, biodiversity credits, eco credits, all of this, I think, is you know, is crucial for growing the confidence in the projects that are so needed around the world.
Very good response and challenge that it isn't just about carbon. As the investor, that's the only thing I can buy. But then we talk about the co-benefits, and those are like the critically important bits of the project, but I can only really physically buy the carbon. And sometimes in chasing, you can buy really cheap carbon, you know, monocultures, fast growing trees, but you want those kind of diverse restorative ones that can take longer and therefore means they can cost more. But you're buying those wider ecosystem services. Also interesting that, you know, you've talked about transparency, data, people, trust, which is basically the same answers to the first question. So I think there's going to be an ongoing, recurring theme within this. Where shall I go to next? Damien, Terraformation, what's your kind of view on how do we build investor confidence?
Yep. At Terraformation, we have a solid due diligence with a series of technical, legal, social criteria. It's a process with both desk review and on-site visits. I explained that we built an accelerator almost 2 years ago. We received about 700 applications for our accelerator, application from project on the ground, from team on the ground. I do think we have a quite good benchmark now. I will not list you the full criteria list, of course, but I will try to summarize with 3 success factors to identify and scale a quality project. First, in my opinion, is human factor. Is a project and the project design centered on people? It means concretely, have the deforestation drivers been analyzed and analyzed with this 360 degrees view, not only with one skills, technical skills, and put different glasses, the forester technical glasses, the social glasses, the investor glasses. It's really important then that the due diligence is made by this multidisciplinary team expert. Second type of question with this human factor is it the right team on the ground operating? Remember, 40 years, it's a long time. Then do we have the right team? And it means, does it include social technical skills, but also strong management skills? We are working, we met and we have in our network a lot of very wonderful teams on the ground used to develop a pilot project. It's not the same at all when we make a 10x scale up of the project. And basically teams and project manager are really becoming great manager and with different type of skills. And it's important to really double check also this aspect. And I would also give an emphasis on the relationships with the landowners and with the committees, if this is committees who own the land in some cases. Is this relationship strong, and is the land tenure clear also? And it's again a long due diligence. Most of the time should be done on the ground, discussing with different members of the committees and the family to understand the history again of the land ownership of the land. But this is really part, again, it's a land tenure for hundreds of years with the new forest. It's important to take times to really understand this land tenure. That's what I put in the human factor. There is, of course, the technical factor. Really important to put the right species in the right place, definitely. And then we need high quality experts involved in the design, understanding the soils. If we take again the example of the mangrove restoration, it's important to really understand the hydrology also, not only the soil, but also the flux of water and saline water where we want to plant mangrove. And this really technical issue that need to be analyzed deeply. And the last success factor for high quality projects, in my opinion, is a financing factor. We already discussed this during the first question, but really having the right investor is key to have the right and the quality project, and then joining at the early stage. And also in this financing factor, it's finding the right financial benefit sharing with the landowners and with the committees. And it's again a lot of discussion with the stakeholders on the ground to build this fair benefit sharing with the stakeholders.
I think that last point's a really important point, because we aren't a typical investor at Grosvenor. We want credits rather than cash. And a lot of people coming into this for investing for essentially financial returns. But in taking credits out of the system, you kind of strangle it, because ultimately you need to sell those credits on the market in order to generate income to feed back to the communities. So it's kind of always an interesting dynamic in terms of who the type of people are who are funding these projects, and how do you ensure a fair apportionment of financial flow back into the communities to support them. Because if you just do a 100% early offtake agreement, then actually you're not selling those credits into the open market. And hopefully the value of credits will increase substantially over the course of the next few years. And you want the communities to be profiting from that just as much as the investors are. Anyway, that's my little challenge. Pascal, over to you. What do you think?
Maybe one question for you, Damien and Andy, if you have an answer on that. But do you recommend having, let's say, a percentage of these revenues that have to be shared with all the stakeholders, or this is kind of absolute value?
We are working with a percentage, but also giving an amount also in cash that they receive. Why this? Because as I said earlier, especially communities we are working in Ghana, Tanzania, Kenya, they want also to have security, and percentage of maybe the market of the carbon market will rise in 10 years. It's really far away for them. That it's good to keep this incentive also, and when the market will rise, that of course they will benefit, but they also want and need to have the what is my absolute value right now in the next year, in the next 4 years. It's important to give clarity to the community about the amount they're going to receive.
We've got another project that I can't really talk about, but I can talk about the cash flow. You basically have the kind of operations and maintenance costs at the top, and then the community in which we're supporting then gets 2/3 of the essentially turnover of the scheme. And then at the bottom, we get then a proportion of the kind of the bonus or performance fee once it gets to the bottom. So they will always get, the community will always get kind of 2/3 of their share once you've paid for the ongoing management operations, etc. And then the remainder is then split between the investors. So it means they kind of get the proportional share, but they also get like a minimum amount to help fund the ops and maintenance, etc. as well. And I think that type of thing is really important. Like, you know, when credits start getting traded through brokers, or when people go at it thinking it's just like a normal financial product, you forget that you're trading people's livelihoods and ecosystem restoration, and you always need to ensure fair apportionment of the financial flow back to the community. Otherwise, you're just profiting on other people's hard work unfairly. So that's something that's kind of quite well, rings very true to Grosvenor in terms of the types of what's it called, contracts we want to set up. Anyway, Pascal, you haven't answered the question yet. Eyes on you.
Yeah. No, thanks for your answer, because I think it helps me on one point that Damien mentioned, but it's about the scalability of the models, and showing the investors that we can offer technologies that are replicable on million hectares. That's inspiring confidence. And this is like talking for us, it's about like the drones, the seed pods, the encapsulation, the monitoring, all this multi-year planning, and having our algorithm picking the right species because we analyzed them in the lab before. And so we have the 10x, but then there would be the 1 million x. And so we need to make sure that we are able to multiply the size of these projects, and showing that we can anticipate like all the scale, not only on 100 hectares, but on 100,000 hectares. And so that's really important, I think, for funders to check, but as well for implementers to show that we are able to give visibility on this, let's say 100,000 or 1 million hectares deployment of projects. So the first point would be really like checking and showing the visibility on how do you scale, how do you make sure that this will work, even with local communities, even with biodiversity, but on a 10x, 1 million x size. The second point linked to this, and this to complement what, and complement as well, but what Mick was saying about the carbon aspect, that is not really the point when we are deploying reforestation projects. What we say at MORFO is that we have this like 2+1 pillars in every project about biodiversity, social, that will bring then carbon sequestration. And if you forget one of the first two pillars, then you will never see any carbon credits. And so that's really like important for investors to make sure that none of these pillars are being forgotten. And I think that like the third one that I wanted to mention is about what like I think Mick and Restor are doing really well at the different scale of what we do, is about the dashboard where you can see everything that's happening. I think for Restor is like really about the global vision of all the fields. For us, we can check about the seedlings and the 1 centimeter resolution, about what kind of species are growing and how much biomass is growing, and then calculating how much carbon is being sequestering. And so all the actors on the value chain have a big value for making the project like being real, then making it happen on the ground. And so for like every step is really important, and I think that's something we've already discussed together. But how do we make sure that these billions are transforming into millions and then into thousands? And so I think that when we talk about scalability, it's about how do you scale having these billions, but that you make sure that every single euro, dollar, or reais, or any currency will be transferred into the right people. And so that's as well linked about what you were saying about how do you share the revenues. And that's really a challenge of the whole value chain that has to collaborate really deeply to make sure that the right amounts are going to the right hands. And I think that's really like an important topic that we have. And we are like the last mile of this project. So we know that we are transforming these millions into like unities. And the last point that we have is the combination between the field work, the science, and the technology. And like we need to check the project from satellite view, but we need to check them from drone view, but we need as well to check the soil and analyze the soil to understand how the quality of the soil is being changed and how much biodiversity you are observing, first on the flora point of view, but then on the fauna as well. And so we believe that we'll always have to involve all this like scale of monitoring, from ground analysis to drone analysis to satellite analysis. And this is a great way to show confidence to investors, because they can check your project from centimeter point of view or to a global point of view with a satellite.
Great, thank you. I mean, I think that leads us very succinctly or very swiftly onto the kind of the final question, which is, we know these projects need to, we know restoration projects need to scale quickly, both in terms of making small ones bigger, but also finding more of them and influxing capital to make as many restoration projects globally happen concurrently. What signals are you already seeing within the market and your projects? And are we scaling at the speed which we need to? Are you seeing sufficient interest from investors in local communities that we can scale? Hopefully there's a positive spin on this, but there could also equally be a negative one. But yeah, do you see the kind of market signals that there is sufficient appetite for the kind of scaling we need of these projects? And I am going to start, yeah, Pascal, back to you.
Okay, thank you. I think that we've been through like many years of claims, and we were not seeing the money like transforming from these billions or millions to the field and to real projects. We've really seen a shift this year, talking for us about, okay, there are claims, but we have like concrete discussions with funders and actors that want to deploy this project now, that want to make this happen. And so to make it short, yes, we've seen a difference, and we are seeing the actors now acting.
Yourself. Damien?
Yep.
Yeah. How about yourself? What kind of market signals are you seeing?
Actually, I have been working in the tropical forest for almost 20 years, and before the emergence of the carbon market, most reforestation projects were funded by the states or public grant and international aids. And actually, they were often criticized for their failure or non-permanence. We can, just ask all foresters 20 years ago, 15 years ago. We received already quite a lot of criticisms that actually help us also to improve our work on the ground. And at that time, the reason often given was, hey, this is a short-term project because the public funding is only 2 to 3 years. The local context has not been analyzed enough because we were in a hurry to design the project. There is little scientific robustness. That were the type of criticism received for the public-funded projects. I do believe that we collectively as a forester make some good progress on this, and the really good things with the market, carbon market funding, which will not be the single solution. There will still be a lot of public funding, of course, to restore our tropical forest. But the really good thing is that it's shifting the paradigm of the longevity of the forest. We are thinking now our project for 40 years in terms of implementation. Making a budget of 40 years is really good for forester instead of a 3 years budget. We put a lot of emphasis on the long tenure at the beginning of the project, whereas in the past it was a bit, long tenure, it's really messy in this country, in this part of Africa. We'll leave it to the next World Bank billion funding projects that will happen in the future. Then now at the level of the carbon project, we are really addressing this issue, then this is really good. The signal is that in the market is that investors are really asking deeper this type of questions. They are analyzing deeper the project. It's not superficial, and we are signing deals. It means it's concrete.
That's a very positive sign, ultimately, that you're signing contracts. So you're actually getting flows of capital into the projects. Also, I think, like you say, it's investors are taking more of an emotive ownership of these schemes rather than it's not just a tree planting. They actually want to ensure that their money is going to the greater good. So actually they want to go in and unpick all of the kind of challenges and make sure that all that due diligence has been completed. Nick, how about Restor? What are your views on the market signals?
Well, you know, we're seeing a very interesting shift, I believe. And while we're not developing or certifying projects ourselves, you know, we're really enjoying to see as we facilitate the connection between high quality restoration projects and oftentimes the carbon market, we see a growing interest in these additional ecosystem services and the payment thereof. And I believe that can only mean that the actors and all the stakeholders are more invested and are more nuanced about you know, this work that is needed and that we are trying to make thrive, I think, as a whole. So these co-benefits, the greater focus on people who are affected by deforestation, ecosystem degradation, and also the restoration of ecosystems, whether through reforestation and carbon credit or some other mechanism. I would say, as well as a quest for better monitoring systems and more transparency and more collaboration. Those are for us really good signals that the market is at least evolving in a desirable direction. I'd like to share one example of these sorts of collaborations, and I think also integration of all the knowledge and sort of tools that have been piling over the years. We have the standard one organization who I believe is concerned with setting standards. They're called Ecosystem Restoration Standard. And also Terraformation, who we've obviously heard from today, are using Restor as a way of sourcing potentially high quality projects, thereby relying on, you know, tools that are somewhat external to their own organization and the scientific insights that Restor provides to streamline their project assessment process. And so we see the number of these sorts of relationships keeps growing. As again is the case with, I believe, very positive and innovative approaches around emerging around carbon credits, biodiversity credits, and other eco credits.
Yeah, I like what both yourself and Pascal mentioned, that ultimately you want replicability of a standard of process monitoring. And the more projects that come under Restor, or the more projects that kind of scale to that kind of standard methodology that MORFO kind of rolls out, the easier it is for investors to be like, yeah, okay, I understand that, I can go do 3 more. It's a lot easier to both scale a project, but also look at additional projects as an opportunity. Because at the moment, as with an investor hat on ourselves, like each project is very, very unique and different. And it can take a huge amount of time to kind of go and unpick the complexities of each specific deal. But actually what you want to do is just have like an underlying level of trust in the methodology, the verification, the management. And so having organizations such as yourself, where you do have that kind of that increased level, and transparencies come up quite a lot of times, monitoring, you know, improved data and access, how just bringing up that level of trust will just suddenly make it so much more easier for investors to kind of come in and be like, oh, okay, tick, tick, tick. I've done one project. I've done a sufficient due diligence to understand. I recognize the value that Restor is bringing to this project. Let's go, you know.
Yeah.
So I think more data, more openness, more transparency is definitely a recurring thing across all these questions. I'm going to start going through the Q&A. People, please do feed in. But one that Kate asked 40 minutes ago, so apologies, only coming back to you now. But we've kind of talked around it for a few times. It was aimed at MORFO, but I think it's across the whole piece. Oh, sorry, across the whole panel. Her question is, how do you select a suite of 10 to 20 species from the hundreds of thousands of species that may be available in a surrounding forest? I think the question is broader than just 10 to 20 species. You know, how do we, when you start a restoration project, what is the right approach for creating the species mix? Plus also, I mean, you talked about the soils, you know, understanding the ecology and what would be best for that piece of land, for that community.
I can take this one. So there's something when you work in, let's say, a new geography, new biome, new ecosystem, you have to analyze it before. So meaning that you have to take the species, like when you're doing, of course, native restoration, meaning that you have local and native species that you will restore on the project. But then you need to understand the ecosystem, of evolution over the last years and decades of this ecosystem, and forecasting what will be the evolution of this ecosystem, and then going more into details about, okay, what are the seeds that are present in this ecosystem, in this biome, and what are the ones we should select. And then we have like an R&D process and work that has to be done in our labs to make sure that they are ticking our, like, all the criteria to make sure that we are deploying the right species. And this can be from the drought resistance to the symbiosis between the species and no cannibalization. So, you know, like, and we have to go through, for now, we have 13 criteria to make sure that we can select the species. So that's the background work. But then for every project that you will deploy, we have to go on the field and do this diagnosis, meaning that we'll take soil analysis, we'll do soil analysis, we'll do drone flights at like low altitude to understand exactly how it is and to make sure that we have this first step of the project for the monitoring, and then as well having these satellite imageries. And that's how you can set up all the conditions for a successful project, because you analyze everything, because you know already the biome, you know this ecosystem, but then as well that you are going to this specific project and that you're doing the right and in-depth analysis.
Is there an issue with access to that technology? As in, you're working in probably quite remote communities. Like, how do you get the technology there? How do you get the expertise and the resource to be doing all these surveys? Are you doing it weekly, monthly, annually? Like, how do you link this very technologically advanced solution to local rural communities?
Is it for me as well, or should I?
Yeah, for you.
Okay, sure. So for all these projects, it's like the same. When you are going for this diagnosis, there is this social and economical context to understand. And so doing the surveys can be like from us, but usually we work with NGOs, like local NGOs that have a lot of experience in this particular region and that know deeply the communities there. And so there's, of course, this pre-survey before the project. And then whenever we are going to do this monitoring, so during the first year, we're going between like every 3 to 6 months. And then it starts to be like an annual monitoring. But then like every monitoring that we do is about all these criteria that we are checking, not only the soils, not only the biomass, but as well, how is this project received by the local communities?
I want to add something also on what Pascal said. Often, native species are the most adapted to the sites we want to restore, but not the easiest to find. just because due to deforestation for the last 50 years, we have lost many of these native trees, and then it's sometimes really hard to find the native seeds. And therefore, seed collection and seed storage and seed propagation is a key activities in the project. Just after the full analysis I just described very well, Pascal. At Terraformation, we created a seed bank. It's a container, shipping container that we can put very close to the nursery on the reforestation site off grid, and we can store the seeds. And we train then our local partner on the ground for the identification of the old trees that are able to produce very good seeds, then collection of the seeds, storage, propagation. That's one key activities, especially as globally in the tropic reforestation activities are really scaling. And then this seed identification or propagation is really important and will be more and more important in the future.
I think my next question kind of links between all of that, the difference between seeds, seedlings, kind of mature trees, and then forests. Like, what is the drop-off rate? How do we track these projects going forwards to making sure, because, you plant a seed, you hope for the best. You plant a seedling, storm comes through, how are we monitoring these projects to making sure we've both got the right mix? Because every day is a learning day. And making sure they are growing like at the scale which we designed. Open question.
I can take this one if you want. I think just to end on what Damien was saying, like if we want large scale reforestation, we'll need large quantities of seeds, and for now, effectively, like the supply won't be enough. So we think like Terraformation and many actors that are playing now a crucial role in making sure that we can scale this operation, but having the sufficient supply. For the second question, of course, we have to collaborate really tightly with nature. As like talking for ourselves, we are not like pouring water on the plants and on the seeds that we are disseminating. So we have to make sure that we work accordingly to what nature is forecasting. So of course we need to follow the meteorology very closely, and with our friend El Nino and his perturbation recently, we need to make sure that we can anticipate a little bit of what will happen in the coming month. But as well, as I was saying, this drone monitoring helps us to understand exactly what are the species that did thrive when you have some droughts or when you have like excess of water, and that you can make sure that you can correct or adjust your plantation strategies if it's a multi-year one and you have like several plantation, to make sure that you can compensate what has been like destroyed, or at least that has less worked in the past month.
I think bring Mick.
Yeah.
So yeah, Mick, because I think like your tool kind of like once you get past the seedling, then you can start using really large spatial data, and your tool kind of comes into its own at that point, right?
Yes. Well, actually, it's a little bit of a limitation with Restor in our remote sense data, is that the resolution we have, it's very difficult to track, say, new seedlings, small trees that at the level that maybe MORFO does with drones flying at low altitude. I'm by no means avoiding the question, Andy, but I actually had another thing that was growing in me, because I have a background in forest and nature conservation too, and so I'm always quite happy hearing about the ecological, the ecological lens at species selection and all of this. But I'm also really curious, if you have any stories, MORFO or Terraformation, Damien, working with local communities to understand what sorts of species work in a given context, and also what sorts of species maybe were there before deforestation happened. That sort of legacy, like, is that something you're also able to look into as part of your work on the ground? Because whenever I have the chance to do some MRV and this kind of projects on the ground, I feel like there's so much content, so much I'm learning about that ecosystem and what works there that I couldn't have predicted from the mere study of the soil and what biome I am in alone. So I'm curious how you sort of bring in that as well, if you do at all.
Yeah, so I guess in a nutshell for this part, we have first the analysis of the existing ecosystem, so knowing what are the species that are already there and which ones we should replicate and make sure that they are part of this project. But as I was saying, like there's a big part of anticipating climate change, and so at a scenario of like +4 degrees, is this local native species be there in 100 years? So that's a part of how we select species, but there's like many other criteria. But talking about local communities, what are the ones that will have the most, let's say, co-benefits for the population? Talking about, I don't have the name in English, but how do you feed people with cocoa, with acai, with cashew or castanha do Brasil? Like you have many different species that can have an economical or just a feeding value for the population.
Or medicinal.
And the last, yeah, and the last part is of course the ecosystemic value of some species that you cannot eat any fruit or anything, but it helps the forest to stand and to grow better.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Thank you.
We cannot hear you, Andy.
Nearly lasted the full 90 minutes, but yeah, the mute button has come and caught me out. A question came in from George. It was aimed at Damien, but I think it's could go to the whole panel. Why is blue carbon considered more valuable than ordinary carbon? Yeah, a ton of carbon sequestered is the same.
Big question. I'm not sure it's considered as more valuable. For sure, in the market from investor, a lot of investors wanted a blue carbon project, but I would not say it's more valuable. It's bringing the reason why it's in high demand. It's usually first because it has a high sequestration rate. It's basically trees that are growing the roots in the water and the leaves on the sun, and it's growing quite well with a high sequestration rate compared to other terrestrial ecosystem more in semi-arid area. And that's one reason through the eyes of the investor. Another one could be it's usually an area that where it's difficult to have other agricultural crops because it's saline area. And it's difficult, for example, to put maize on this. Then usually, again, I don't want to make too much generation, but usually there is no conflict or not a lot of conflict of land use with agricultural production. But we can have salt mining production and all these type of activities. And I think it's another key factors. And maybe number 3, it has an idea, but not always true. But I think from the eyes of the investor that it's more easy and more successful to plant mangrove. But as the forester, and it's not true for in every context, because of course it's not only planting propagule in the mud, it's also understanding the hydrology, the soil, and like other reforestation project, bad mangrove project has a lot of loss also, a lot of mortality than. But yes, I would say that's probably the reason why.
I've got a view on this as well. Luckily, it's very similar to yours. I don't think they're more valuable. I think that like a carbon offset is a weird product because it shouldn't follow market forces. The cost of that project should be based on how much it costs to deliver that sequestration. And a mangrove project, yes, like you said, it spits out tons of carbon quicker, but also it can be more costly to set up. So the value, sorry, I just used value. It isn't the value. The cost of that project is higher, so you can expect to pay or charge more for that credit versus, you know, a deforestation prevention project, which has less upfront capital costs. So that ton of carbon saved is a lower price point. So it's not necessarily saying as an investor that I value blue carbon more than I value a traditional afforestation or reforestation credit. It just means that I know that that ton of carbon has cost more to create. And if you don't want to strangle the project development, you need to ensure that the people on the ground are getting a fair share of that cost. Similarly, I would argue, and this might be quite contentious, that a biochar project isn't more valuable than an afforestation project, or you know, carbon capture and storage isn't 100 times more valuable than a reforestation project. It's just that the price point of that technology is so much greater than what we're doing and what we're talking about today. So I think it's less about how the sector values it, and it's more just the fair proportionate cost of delivering that project. And yes, if Damien can charge £150 for a mangrove credit and Pascal can only charge 50 quid for one of his projects, then Damien's just a better salesman. It doesn't mean that one is more valuable. It just, well, yeah, I'm undermining my own position there. But yeah, I think it's less about the value and it's more about the fair apportionment of cost. Hopefully you all agree with me.
Yeah, I think that just to complement that, I think that there was like an amazing initiatives from the Frontier Climate Fund, and where they created this 1 billion fund in the US, but investing at least $100 per ton per credit to make sure that they finance scalable solution, but innovative and technological solution to sequester or to capture carbon. And I think that's part as well of the role of the investors to make sure that they pay the right price or even a premium to make sure that they make appear scalable solutions.
I'd agree with that. We shouldn't be chasing to the bottom and finding the cheapest projects. We should be working to give the correctly price what's needed on the ground. I think we've largely answered most of the questions. There's one, again, is aimed at you, Damien. You're talking about the value chains and the value of honey in these local communities. You know, a lot of the social value across these schemes isn't, it's creating additional revenues, etc. What happens if that market becomes flooded with really high value honey? If no one's buying it, that actually has no value. Like, how are you ensuring that there is a market for the, you know, the additional products that are being produced by these schemes?
Yeah,
Pascal, you also mentioned agroforestry projects, like type options as well. So yeah, Damien, over to you.
Very good question. That's really part of the design of the project, identifying the right value change and transformation, and also access to the market. With the example of the honey, it's quite easy to collect, restore, and to sell to the next market. But in, I would say, quite a lot of projects more remote, and when we have agroforestry, let's say we produce orange or citrus. Of course, if your market is 8 hours driving in the bad roads, the countryside, you have a lot of example of your fruits that cannot access to the market, and then you don't succeed, and then communities will not get the income from this. To avoid this type of misleading activities is really to make the right diagnosis during the design of the project and identifying the market, where is the market, and how the project can support access to the market, including also some marketing, selling a nice mangrove honey to hostel, for example, in a mangrove area where there is some local tourism, also can give a higher price for this honey and then for the communities. it's part of the project design.
We're almost running out of time. Sorry, Pascal, did you want to come in on that?
No, there was just like a recent study that showed that like most of the project are like less than 100 kilometers from the cities. And so, yes, sometimes you have, as Damien was saying, like really bad roads and you barely can access. But yeah, usually you have like this concentration like nearby like bigger cities. So that can be, and as Damien was saying, like you can uplift communities and you can uplift the projects from this forest, having these like surrounding populations and, let's say, consumption.
Thank you. Yeah, as I said, we're almost running out of time. I wanted to give 4 or 5 minutes just to kind of final wrap up within the panel. I wanted to end on a positive. So my question to the three of you, looking forward to the next 3 years, what excites you the most around reforestation and the voluntary carbon market? And who am I going to put on the spot first? Mick, I'm going to start with you.
Do I have to answer this focusing on the carbon market?
Point. No, you don't. That could be what excites you the most, as not just talking about carbon anymore.
Yes, indeed. I think especially maybe the central word not being carbon could be a good outcome. But I think you know, of course, from the vision of Restore is that it has become a platform where nature stewards can seamlessly access resources they need to thrive, find each other, find the right investors, all that we've been chatting about today. And also that anyone, anywhere in the world, right? That's the great benefit of the web, I think, can contribute to the positive impact on the ground, to the global restoration movement directly. And I think maybe more personally, as I'm quite a monitoring and evaluation geek myself, you know, it would be something along the lines of what I shared earlier. It's this integration of all the kinds of diverse types of knowledge we have, the traditional, the local knowledge, but also the scientific data and all these technologies that have been emerging and that are piling as we speak. I'm not really sure what sort of planet Earth we would have then, but you know, this potential is something that definitely excites me a lot. Oh, we can't hear you. One more time.
Really nice challenge that it isn't carbon, it's ecosystem restoration, and it's combining the kind of traditional, the kind of cultural knowledge as well as the latest science. So yeah, really, really nice. Damien, over to you. What are you most excited about?
Actually, I'm very excited about the new players entering the market, including the new investors, because they are coming with new ideas, new approaches, new collaboration. And we have collectively actually a responsibility to build the fair carbon market, and it's up to us actually to make it in the right way, and seeing it as a really new value chains for community farmers, and with all along the value chain, each one of the responsibility and a fair place. That's exciting.
I really like that as well. It is, yeah, fair is incredibly important, that this is a market for mutual benefit. It's not a traditional financial market. It is using it as a force for good and creating financial flows to where it's needed most. Pascal?
I think that what's exciting me the most is that I'm believing that we are going to succeed, and that 80% of the answer like will be answered within the next 3 years. You know, there's this question of will our children sit under the shade of the trees we've planted? And I think the answer is gonna be yes, because we all know, we are all aware of this political risk environmental risk. There are many risks, but I think that all like these discussions and the alignment that we are forging between funders, developers, implementers, local communities, investors, governments will like succeed in like success stories, and that this success will inspire newcomers. As Damien was saying, like we'll have new players always more inspired with new techniques, with new ideas, and so the next 3 years will be like amazingly exciting for all this.
I love your enthusiasm. I would definitely share that. What excites me the most is that in 3 years' time, we're going to be even closer to 2030. We're going to be even closer to everyone's net zero, zero carbon, carbon neutral, whatever types of goals we have. So there's going to be huge influxes of interest and capital within this space. And that's going to build each and every year as we get closer to 2030. Also, the fact that the US government, the EU ETS, like there's so much more positive pressure from governments on the value of removal credits within, and private institutions helping fund these schemes. That direction of travel is going to be unchanged. We're at an inflection point where we're kind of getting rid of a lot of the crap at the moment, and in doing so, we're doubling down on these great quality projects that your 3 great organizations are helping to support. So it really excites me looking forward into the future and what we can deliver, and hopefully also in 3 years' time, the mangrove that Grosvenor has not invest in Terraformation, we'll be able to see it using Restor's platform and actually be able to track it from space. But let's wait and see. Anyway, we have now run to time. That's been fascinating for me. I've really enjoyed it. I hope everyone on the call has as well. And yeah, just a special thanks to the panelists who are committing their time to it today. So yes, thank you, everybody. And goodbye.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks, Mick.
Thank you.
Thanks, Damien.
Thanks.